the immortal John Hancock here, and today I'm uploading part 2 of an awesome 2-part series that I did with Matt from Pomelo Pictures, and we talked about a lot of things. Game collecting, preservation, the Snes Mini, a bunch of stuff. Had a lot of fun, had a great conversation with him. It was a lengthy conversation, and part 1 is on his channel, and I'm going to put a link below. And this is actually part 2 I uploaded on my channel, and they're separate conversations, but it was just a pleasure of talking to someone from a different region and just talking video games. It was an awesome conversation, and I'm really excited that I got to do it. There's a lot of information about myself, previous collecting, and just a whole bunch of stuff. We talked about a lot of things, a lot of different topics. So check it out, and check out Matt's channel.
Hey guys, Matt from Pomelo Pictures here, and we are back with part 2 where I'm talking to the immortal John Hancock. We've been talking collecting, and in the first part of this video we were talking a little bit about motivations for different collectors, and we finished up talking about stuff that's coming out at the moment, stuff like Star Fox 2 on the Super Nintendo Mini, but we're going to move on from that. We spent far too long talking about Nintendo and the Super Nintendo and NES Mini. I talked a little bit about how the fact that we're getting on the, not to touch on it again, but we are getting stuff that we never got on the Super Nintendo on this SNES Mini. We never got Earthbound. We never got Super Mario RPG. For you, getting back to collecting, are you focused more on North American releases, or do you collect everything? Are you collecting Japanese, European games as well?
It's tough to collect other regions because they're so expensive.
Sure.
The truth of the matter is, I go into a game store around here, and this is how it is around here in the States, and very few have imports. There's Pink Gorilla up in Seattle, and they have a great import selection. There's Billy Galaxy in Portland, and he has some cool import stuff. There's people that have access to imports. There's people at retro game shows that offer it, but it's never cheap. No. And it's always expensive, unless it's like, Famicom, which is like, that's fairly cheap.
Yeah.
I typically, if I want imports, I go to Canada. I find it in Canada, even at Vancouver Retro Gaming Expo, which is the like Vancouver, Canada area, has a great selection of imports there. There's a couple vendors there, but honestly, I focus on North American games because that's normally what I find.
Sure.
That's normally what I find on in North American eBay, and that's what I pursue. I'm also really passionate about the crash years, which predominantly happen in North America.
Yeah, yeah.
But 83 to 85, I'm really pursuing like boxed Atari stuff, and that stuff's pretty hard to get. But I'm passionate about that too because I grew up with it and I remember it. Yeah. I'm less connected to stuff I didn't grow up with because it's cool, but it's like you want to pay over $100 for a game that I'm not really going to play a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's Sorry, go on.
I was going to say that some of the imports that I really want to pursue is like the vintage Nintendo stuff that came in Japan, like the TV Game 6, the original Pong console for Nintendo, like the early electronic stuff.
Yeah. The
Super Cassette Vision, and really for imports, Sega Master System. There's so many amazing. I know that you folks got many amazing Master System games.
Yeah. I
don't have any of that import stuff, and I have a North American set now, and I'd like to branch out and maybe get some of the other stuff.
Yeah, because I touched upon this in the video I did with Reggie. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because Sega was bigger here in the sort of 80s and 90s, there is a lot more sort of Master System stuff. But then when we get into sort of Nintendo stuff, if you look at the list of games for North America and compared to Europe, it's so much smaller. And I was saying earlier about things like Kirby's Dream Land 3, but there's a lot of Game Boy is my favorite system. There's a lot of Game Boy games that you just can't find over here, and you're kind of restricted to eBay, and the shipping costs to the UK are really high, which is a shame because it makes it hard to collect for. But also, unless you're sure that you have a modern TV that can play these consoles, you can't play them on CRT TVs. At least with with sort of the difference between US and Japan. At least they're both NTSC. If we try and import, I've got a Super Famicom behind me here. I can play that on my modern TV, but if I hook it up to my CRT that's over there, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work at all. And that was the thing with. Do you have like PAL TVs in your collection? Or?
You bring up a great point. I've struggled with this. You guys, let's see. So across the pond, Atari came there late. I hear.
Yes.
I hear that Atari, and so there's many different consoles called many different things. Hamonex released some. There was many companies released these primitive Pong consoles that played cartridges. And they're called different things. That's a PC 50X series of games consoles. I mean, it's pretty obscure. But I got excited because I had one in my collection and tried hooking it up to my North American TV. Nope, not going to work. There's no way it can really work. I need to get. I can try. I can try a PAL to NTSC like signal converter, but even that's kind of a gamble.
Yeah. Because
the signal may not be strong enough. But it's frustrating because that's what we run into all the time. There's some awesome PAL stuff that you can't run on North American TVs. And no, to answer your question, there isn't PAL TVs in the area.
They're almost impossible because the thing is they weigh so much that trying to find an NTSC TV over here or a PAL TV over there must be impossible. But I think that's one thing why Sega did so well over here is that a lot of Sega stuff was region free. They never really announced that it was region free, but like I've got behind you probably can't see it, but I've got a copy of Sonic the Hedgehog on Genesis, Mega Drive, and Japanese Mega Drive. And I don't need all three because the UK Mega Drive plays all three of them. No issues whatsoever. A lot of the EA games on the Mega Drive, you could import the Genesis version. It worked fine.
Love that.
So if you were a Sega collector, or just a Sega gamer in the 90s, you could import these games. It might have been a little bit expensive, but you could import them, and there was a good chance that they were going to work. It doesn't always work, but also, if you knew what you were doing with the Mega Drive, you could get inside it and you could fit a little 50 to 60 hertz converter, and it worked fine. But with things like Nintendo, it's just impossible. Like you can sort of get rid of the region locking chip, or you know what pin to snip. But that will still lock you out of NTSC because it just won't work on the TV. For us, though, we had two different PAL regions. We had PAL A and PAL B. So at least that meant that you could open up to wider Europe. But we were still shut out of American things. So it's nice now for a UK collector to be able to get Japanese and American stuff because even though it doesn't look great on a modern TV, at least it works. Yeah.
And one cool thing I've noticed that some of these new clone consoles coming out, whether, they're varied in quality, but even with the Retron HD, it has a PAL TSC switch.
Yeah,
which I like. I like that it has that. It may not be the best clone console, but at least you're able to play it now on a modern TV. You don't have to worry about that, because that's frustrating about collecting other regions. Is that if it doesn't work on my TV, then I'm probably not going to pursue it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was why another reason why I was always a handheld guy, because most of the time they were region free. The 3DS, not so much, because it had a camera on it and certain laws around being able to connect to the internet with a camera and things that meant that it wasn't region 3. But generally speaking, they were everything. Not just Nintendo. Most handhelds were, and that was one thing that was always really nice. You could get odd, games that were never released over here, but were released in wider Europe or in Japan or in America, and there's no issues whatsoever. They just work. But one thing I was gonna ask you. I mean, you're sat now with a huge wall of games behind you with boxes and things. As a collector, how do you know when you've got a complete set of something? Because with some things there are lists of what there are, but things like, say, I saw a video you did recently where you got the Star Fox Super Weekend cart.
Yes.
And some things like that, not necessarily that one specifically, but when something is a promo or something that it wasn't necessarily a retail release, how do you
Yes.
know when it's complete? Like, because how do you know if if there exists a box for it or whether there exists a manual for it? Is it just talking to the wider community and trying to
Yes.
figure out what it is, or because
Yeah,
there
so
must be some that you collect and then you think, well, I've got the cartridge, but is this all there is?
yeah, so I think it never ends. So going for a complete set is like kind of going down a rabbit hole. It never really fully ends. And so I get this asked, well, that's a great question. It gets asked all the time. What do I use for my lists? Digipress did a series of lists for North American games. I think RF Generation does another good job of like complete set lists, and I use those to organize and to double check. And anytime I complete a set, I use a list and I double check to make sure I have every game.
And does that include things that it should be in the box with it as well? Like, because it's not just for you as well. A lot of the time, it's not just complete in box doesn't mean box manual cartridge. You want to have all the inserts and things as well, don't you?
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm missing, like, for my N64, I think it's near complete, but that's pretty tough to get all the goodies of everything. You know, when I have a complete, N64 set, it's at least cart, manual, box, but you know, and that it's so different with people because it's like, oh, you don't have the warranty card, it's not complete. And, you can go down the rabbit hole, and for people that really want to focus on that, that's cool. But because I collect so many different things, I don't worry about like missing one of those cards.
Sure.
I do go for the game. It really comes down to like, do I have every game? Yeah. And then the next step is, well, do I want to pursue anything else? Like, for example, Game Gear, I just have a loose cart set for my US Game Gear set because it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for Super Nintendo, I have 2/3 of it loose cart and 1/3 of it, which is the harder stuff to get in box. But N60 for Nintendo, I'm missing about 50 boxes and manuals for a complete in box set. Of course, I'm a loose cart stadium events.
Sure.
But I talk to collectors. I double check lists. I have conversations about those lists with other people. I go off like an established list that is verified as the complete set.
Yeah.
There's always going to be debates. So Star Fox Super Weekend Challenge, I don't count promos as part of the retail set.
No.
I did a video that was pretty popular on my channel about, I completed my Super Nintendo retail set.
Yeah.
I put that in the title so that, people would say, well, you're missing this and that. And it's tough. And it kind of never ends. Like, you really can go, like, you could go for complete in box. Well, then they're sealed. And then there's people that collect the cartons of sealed boxes of games.
Yeah, shipping. Yeah, absolutely. I
mean, it never ends. And so it's kind of what you want to define as complete. And that's different for everybody. I think the loose definition would be at least a complete collection of a game console would at least consist of a copy of the game.
Yeah.
And people get all hung up with the word complete, and that can mean different for different collectors. And there's not a right or wrong. It's kind of whatever you want to pursue it. And that's for me. I try to go for a complete. And anytime I find a warranty card or something, but I don't have a list of that type of stuff on me that I'm pursuing, but I would say most of them have all that.
Yeah. In part one, we talked a little bit about, for you, it's not just about preservation, it's also about education as well. Yeah. You've talked quite a lot in the past about wanting to open a museum for your case. I mean, what's the vision for that? I mean, what would you see that as?
So my vision for that would be, it's kind of in a 3-step process. The first step is to organize my collection in my house, and that's 2 parts. I'm building an expansion. I want to have my pre-crash room, which is small, but it'll be really nice and focused and something you don't see a lot anymore. Next, I'm going to organize this game room. You see the organized part behind me, but you don't see the unorganized part, which Barnacles did a video of and I'd like to really kind of tidy that up as best I can. the next step after that is to form a nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm.
I then would then pursue cities and market it, because then I think by then, part of building my YouTube is to build popularity,
Yeah.
and to build influence, and then I'll have leverage
Mm-hmm.
to then do a local game museum, because
Mm-hmm.
then I'll be able to say like, well, I have backers, or because I'd like to have it. I would like to start off as a small museum,
Mm-hmm.
bigger than what I have my games
Yeah.
presented in, local, because
Yeah.
the town I live in is right on I-5.
Mm-hmm.
It's between Portland and Seattle. I actually think it'd be a great place for it.
That
And
sounds.
it,
I mean, between sort of Seattle and Vancouver area where there's a lot of game developers, and then Portland where there's obviously the
yeah,
Retro Gaming Expo. That would be the perfect place to have it.
yeah, I think just getting seeing what the city would finance,
Mm.
and what I think it just comes down to money.
Mm.
I'd love for someone. I mean, it'd be great if someone would like to fund it, and that it really comes down to money. Because
Yeah.
if I had that taken care of, I would love to do it. Because I mean, really, you can't. There isn't many people out there that would want their game collection on display.
Sure.
And I think once I did it, once the museum starts, I think other people are going to want to contribute to it. But it's kind of one of those things where it's a lot of work. It's a lot of
Sure.
time. It's a lot of selfless hours of just wanting to do it.
Mm.
And I don't want to do it for money. Like, really,
No.
it comes down to, I mean, the problem that I run into is that, I have a day job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a teacher, and for me to be a curator or something, I couldn't do it with my current job. So either it would have to be my job, or to be on some type of stipend or something. And so that's always a challenge of these type of projects to come around. And the really sad thing is, other than a computer museum in Seattle, there isn't a large dedicated video game museum in Washington or Oregon.
No.
Which is really weird if you think about it. And so
Well,
I'd like to do it. And that's the long-term goal.
Well, it is an important thing because we sort of talked a little bit about things that get lost earlier in part one of the video, but it's not just that sort of prototypes get lost on hard drives and things. If you think about the future of gaming, a lot of things are just going to be tied to the console that they're on. Like we mentioned the South Park prototype that was found on an Xbox, and that was a prototype. But in the future, a lot of the times the game is just going to be tied to that. We saw it was a sort of micro example of it, but we saw things like with Flappy Bird when that got taken off the App Store. It's not exactly the best game in the world, but it was then tied to phones and devices that had that on there, and there were people going crazy and spending crazy money. But it's kind of, and the thing is, games get updated so often as well that if you wanted to have a version of that game that you love, you're either not going to be able to find it because you can't download it anymore, or you're going to have to try and find someone that hasn't updated it in a long time. An example I use was FIFA 13. It's not a great game, but I had the iPad version of that game, and in the next year they replaced it with a freemium game. The FIFA 13 was a pay once, you play it, complete game. FIFA 14, freemium game, which is very different. You can't get FIFA 13 now. It's not the best game in the world, but I liked it. I played it a lot on my iPad, but no one else, if I can't recommend that game to somebody and then they go download it, because you can't download it anymore. You can download probably FIFA 17 or whatever the latest one is, and it'll be a freemium game, and the only way to play it is if you've got my iPad or anybody else that's got that game. So when there's something that is more tangible, like the sort of cartridge box manual, to be able to have that and be able to show it to somebody and educate somebody about it is a really important thing, because there were no patches back then. On PC you could get patch discs and things, but most of the time the original copy of the game you'd have on a disc, and then you'd have the patch on a disc. That kind of thing doesn't exist anymore. Once it's patched, the first version's gone. It's on maybe on a hard drive somewhere, but it's gone. And games with you see this a little bit when people back up ROMs. You know, there's games that are full of glitches. The fan community will fix the game of its glitches, but they want to keep an original copy as well because that's important.
Yep. Yeah, and some of the glitches become part of the game aspect.
Yeah.
You know, I think of I do believe the Grand Theft Auto 3 with the tank. The flying tank was actually a glitch, and they play tested the game and actually kept it in the game because it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And so I really want to have a physical media museum because, you know, the truth is we're going digital. We're going digital fast. And, you can go on YouTube and find 500 videos of Pong.
Yeah.
But what you can't find is 500 videos of the physical box of Pong and opening it up and looking at the instructions and seeing the aesthetics of a console. And, that stuff really fascinates me. And so, we're really wanting to pursue stuff like that. And I think having a physical media display of just how things were.
Yeah.
And I think if I was to do a museum, I want to add that it needs to be more than just that. I think it needs to be a place to connect people, a place for the community can use, a place where maybe people can come and game, whether it's board games or even collaborating a video game idea, having maybe a room where they can sit down and share their ideas. I don't know. I have all these visions and stuff of what I want to do. I think the first step is to do something. Yeah. And then if it's successful, then to make it bigger. But I don't know. I definitely want to do it. It may look a lot different, but I'm not going anywhere, and the collection's not going anywhere. So I'll just have to wait and wait and see. So.
Well, you make a good point. It's not just about the actual game itself, but the kind of peripherals that come along with it.
Yep.
I mean,
absolutely.
One of the things that I oddly found really interesting was when I was a kid, when it came to Christmas, I would sit down with there was a store over here called Argos, which is basically a catalog store. You have the catalog, you go through it, and then you go into the store and you collect it. And that's how I wrote my Christmas lists. Nice. The winter catalog would come out, and I'd flip through and things. And last Christmas, I bought a disc off eBay which had scans of the old catalogs from the 90s, and the nostalgia hit of being able to look through these catalogs that I looked through as a kid. It wasn't the game at all. It was something completely different. It was a retail thing, and just little things like looking at what the prices were and looking at how they describe. That's something that not everything like that is going to be backed up. Nintendo Power will be backed up, but all these sort of lesser known magazines, the pamphlets, these kind of marketing things, they can just get lost. And that's the kind of thing that you would end up seeing in a museum. And it's not, the games is one thing, but it's the peripherals that go around it as well, taking you back to what gaming was like in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s.
Nostalgia. It's like the Sears Wish book here in the States.
Yeah,
had a lot of retro stuff. A company that's out of business. Maybe the Montgomery Ward is a good example here of having a flyer brochure talking about a new game. And television had a lot of catalogs because they sold a lot of their products in the 80s by mail. Yeah. Radio Shack, another one here. But I could go on and on. But there's a lot of that's important. The year of the TV. So I think in the museum it'll be important to have a fully functional, different CRTs that people grew up with.
Yeah.
Having an Atari connected to a 70s TV I think would be important, or early 80s. And playing, and having that experience. Portland Retro Gaming Expo did this a long time ago, and it's become really popular. They have a 70s room. And they had a 70s couch with a big console TV with Atari and a bunch of cartridges there. I think stuff like that is important to have that experience because that's what people remember.
That's the word, exactly. That's the word I was going to use. It's part of the experience. It's not just about being able to play the game. Those games were not designed to be played in a modern apartment with a 70-inch HD TV or whatever. They were designed to be played on a wood panel TV,
Absolutely.
with a probably bright orange and brown sofa,
Yes.
and
Yep.
that is part of the experience of it. It's
Shag
not
carpet.
exactly. It's not just about being able to play the game. It's kind of playing the game in the environment that it was meant to be played.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all that, and I kind of struggle with my expansion because I've thought about this a lot about how do I do a small game room? Do I keep it all vintage, or I do a
Yeah.
mix of like modern storage? And I always struggle with that because if it's an Atari room, should I have some wood paneling in there? And it's like, no, but that looks really ugly. So like it's tough. I struggle back and forth, and so I've compromised. It'll have some modern stuff in there, but I'm going to have a Pong cocktail in there in the middle, in the square middle of the room where people can sit down and just chat. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and I think that people can go get nostalgia and remember the experience just by something the way it looks, not necessarily the game itself.
Yeah.
So that's
Before we finish up, I was just going to ask you what in your collection, what are kind of the quirky things that you'd like to collect? Like getting a complete N64 collection complete. That's one thing, but I'm sure there are little things that people may be less interested about. Because for me, I think I mentioned it in part one, was the Gamecom. It was an awful system, but I have a fondness to it because I had one. And things like okay, it's quite a funny story where I had a Gamecom and I was trying to find a copy of Sonic Jam for it. Awful Sonic game.
Yes,
but we never got it in Europe, and I could get it on eBay, but the shipping was going to be quite expensive. So I was working for Sega at the time, and we've got Sonic Team in the London office. There is a Sonic Team in the US, there's a Sonic Team in Japan, but a lot of the marketing for the West is done in Europe. I was like, if anyone knows where I can get a copy, they'll know. I went over to Sonic Team and asked them, do we have a copy of it anywhere? Is there anything in storage? Do we know where we could get one? And literally their faces were, they had no idea what the game was. They actually had to go on YouTube and to type in what the game was to figure out.
Wow.
So things like that I kind of like, because it's not a good game, but it's interesting. It doesn't matter if and things like the N-Gage as well. You've got a complete N-Gage collection.
Yeah.
I actually really like it. Because at the time I had a phone that was pretty similar, and then my friend got this N-Gage, and I was like, you know what? Actually, it's not a bad gaming system. I can see why it failed. It has a lot of flaws to it, but a lot of the games are actually quite good, and they're big titles like Sonic N, Junior Monkey Ball, Puyo Puyo, Tomb Raider. There's some big names on that system. And
the N-Gage is like if you combine a Game Boy Advance with a PlayStation 1. Yeah. And that's the graphics, and it could do 3D games. Not great, but it could do them. And the truth of the matter is, it was a good portable gaming system, and a terrible phone idea.
Yes, that's what it was.
I just recently, this last year, got an original N-Gage phone for the first time in my collection. I had a QD forever.
I've got the QD over here somewhere. I'll try not and pull
and the QD, the QD was actually, it was too little too late.
Yeah.
But the first idea of the N-Gage, where you had to take the battery out to put the game,
holding it up like this as well.
The side taco. What a terrible idea! It just showed that they just didn't know what they're doing.
No.
But the actual, and even the aspect ratio of the screen, it was just, obviously they were just working with their current flip phone parts to make the screen that way. But that just, gamers are like, man, this is just weird. and it was ahead of its time. It was a good idea, and I think that future handhelds took from that great stuff. Yeah. The one weird thing, to answer your question, and there's several that I love pursuing weird stuff. I'd like to finish my Telstar Arcade cartridge collection. They're little it's the only game console to have triangle cartridges.
Yes, yeah.
And there's some odd Pongs I don't have. There's a Gunslinger 2 that was marketed by both Coleco and Sears. And there's one on eBay, but the box is all jacked up. I'd like to get one of those. Atari XE GS. I'm going for a complete set of that. There's 30 or so games for that. I'm missing some of the harder to get stuff. And of course, my kind of long-standing oddball thing, I just did a video with Metal Jesus on this, is my Bally Astrocade.
Yeah.
And so I have a white Astrocade, and I'm really pursuing some of that weird, like, third-party stuff.
Yeah.
I'm also pursuing Apple II games in box and TI-99 stuff. I recently scored some weird TI-99 stuff that's pretty hard to get. The list goes on.
The list is quite long.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I just am fascinated by the oddball stuff, because the more people talk about Nintendo, which I get, Nintendo's a great company, great games, but 500 million people are talking about it.
Yeah,
it makes me want to dig into my garage and talk about the weird stuff.
Yeah, talk about something that no one else is talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I think that will probably just about do it, because we could probably talk for hours, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
But thank you guys for watching. You'll be able to find a link for part 1 in the description below. Please like and subscribe to both me and to John, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much.
Take care.
A huge thanks to Matt of Pomelo Pictures. It was an awesome conversation. I would like to do something like that again. And thank you to everybody around the world who's taken time out of their day to check out my channel. My hat's off. And please subscribe, like, and comment if you like what you see. And I'm doing 3 videos a week, one on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, and uploading at 8 o'clock in the morning, Pacific Daylight Time. Thank you so much. This is the immortal John Hancock. Take care.